we do, you know, as much as you want to say, oh, well, you guys are just you're just trying to wish it because you're trying to believe it. You want to make sense of reality. That's what conspiracy theories do. They want to try to put dots together that aren't there to explain things they can't explain. But let's be honest, a lot of people, I think, who kind of, you know, aware of what's going on, it does seem we're coming to this point where we're going to have some type of shift. We're going through this shift right now. It seems like we're starting to, like, we can, with this way of life we're in right now, this paradigm is unsustainable. It cannot keep going on like this. It has to change if we are to continue. And so in that regard, it does seem like we're going to, and one thing I was going to point to, we get into this a little bit more, but the Hopi Prophecy kind of talks about these cycles and then how we end them, and then and this kind of ties into some other stuff. But
change is brought about in Hopi Prophecy. Change is brought about by a bright blue star. Come on. Yeah, supposedly, according to the Hopi creation myth, we've already been through 4 ages previously, and this is we're about to go into our 5th. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's correct, but it may well be. I mean, if the whole if the whole Yuga cycle has gone through several times before, and it's been recorded previously in stone, which, face it, you know, if you 1,000 years from now, and anything I have on a hard drive is going to be gone. Anything I have written on paper is gone. Anything I have painted on a wall is gone. But if I chisel it into stone, if I build monuments with like 50-ton blocks, that's going to stay. That may survive. So I think our ancient ancestors really had a lot of wisdom that they were trying like heck to pass on to us, trying to build something that would pass the ages, and not just with the monuments, but with their so-called religions. I'm starting to think the religions are not so much about worshiping this god or that god. They're about passing on knowledge through culture and language. There's more than one way to pass on knowledge, and you know, they couldn't rely on, you know, CD-ROMs and videos. 1,000 years from now, this podcast is history. But if, you know, we got out there and made some stone carvings 1,000 years ago, it's possible that somebody could still find it.
Right. So maybe let's move on to the next point then.
Okay.
Now that we've kind of established that, well, the Earth is, when it moves into these higher energies, it grows in mass. And as we kind of talked about a little bit more, so more pair production means more mass and more water.
Right.
And so this could mean many things then in terms of how this could have played out in ancient history. And the first one seems to come to mind, came to mind for me, is this great flood, the deluge, that's been talked about. It's in all types of ancient cultures. They all talk about it. It's everywhere. To say that, oh, they're just all primitive beings and they don't know anything. Okay, why is it everywhere over all the cultures?
Maybe they all different.
Right, yeah, they're all conspired.
They all conspired. It's a huge conspiracy theory.
Right. It's in all the carvings.
It's baked into their culture.
Right, and so if you take growing Earth, now there's still things to figure out here. I'm not saying
absolutely.
And we've even been debating this back and forth a little, but it seems that the Great Flood could have came about because of these cycles and and the pair production going on that causes the Earth to crack, water to seep out the cracks, and the Earth to start to, some of the land to be uninhabitable. We've speculated, like these are, again, we're entertaining ideas here. This is not saying facts here. That some of these people, this could be why we have civilizations up in Machu Picchu, way up in the mountains in South America. We have in Tibet. We seem to have really, really
way up in the Himalayas.
Right,
like the most spiritual people on the planet, it seems.
Right.
What are they doing way up in the Himalayas?
These could have been people who escaped the deluge, and this is where they went. They went to higher lands.
Yeah.
Now, so this could tie right into this great deluge. Now, and this is something I want people to explore more, because I'm still trying to figure this out. Because so the question is, why would the deluge does the deluge happen before the start of the Kali Yuga? In the Kali Yuga? Did it happen in the Golden Ages and then go later? It's hard to piece it exactly when it happened.
It's a good question. It seems that the best I can see is it happened roughly 10,000 years ago, which would put it roughly at the transition out of the Golden Age, or the Satya Yuga. It appears to be, just from reading through the Hindu material, that it's very common for a major cataclysm to occur at the transition between yugas. So for a while I was thinking everything bad was going to happen at the end of Kali Yuga. So I'm thinking we're going to have to go like Noah and build a boat here.
And if you think about it, that whole story might, I mean, I know people are going to be commenting like, oh, these guys are crazy and whatnot. But if you're just entertaining an idea for a second, okay, if you're in the Golden Age where not just humans are in peace, but it seems a lot of all systems are in type of peace and harmony. And if you knew this flood was coming, well, maybe you might build an ark and do this. So I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying I do entertain the idea. Because if we're in the Kali Yuga, there's the possibilities. We can't even imagine the possibilities like we could then, but we can't imagine them right now because we're in this lower state of consciousness. But a state of consciousness that is starting to rise. But anyways.
Right. So if we've been in the Kali Yuga, which is a lower energy level where there hasn't been so much Earth, you can picture it. It hasn't really been growing that much for a while, which is nice because we live here, and I don't want to be on a planet where everything there's earthquakes all the time and volcanoes and flooding all the time. But if you can picture, it's been in this period where it hasn't been growing a lot, but now it's starting to wake up and grow. Like springtime almost. You can almost picture, is there like a lot of water built up and it hasn't yet cracked the seal? And are we going to go through a period of it's going to crack open and we're going to get a lot of water coming out for a while? And is there the possibility that we will have some major flooding? Because of this, it's hard to say. I haven't been through one of these before, so we're just entertaining thoughts and making hypotheses here. But we'll get into possible future scenarios a little bit later. But yeah, man, it's just a fascinating topic here.
One of the other ones that I have many here, but one of the other ones that I came across is, okay, this could be why we seem to have possibly had these higher advanced civilizations before. And if we don't go in a linear progress where we go in cycles of high consciousness and low, well, this could explain Atlantis, Lemuria, these highly advanced civilizations that somehow got wiped out and potentially are underwater now, hence growing earth, water coming out. This would seem to line up a lot with that.
And they seem to be a lot taller than us. We're finding, I mean, it's heavily suppressed, but we found giant skeletons that were like 10 feet tall. Well, you sometimes read about a guy who grows to 7.5, 8 feet tall, and in current gravity, that's just way too tall. It's just too hard on your joints. It's hard on your circulatory system, and they usually die pretty young. That it's just gravity is just too high. Now the thing is, we don't know how fast the Earth is growing. Nobody's given us a straight answer on that. But if in the last growing cycle, going through the whole golden age and all that, the Earth grew enough to previously it was lower gravity to where you could be 10 feet tall. That was cool. But
that's not that drastic of a difference too,
right.
It's a couple, 3, 4,
Well,
4 or 5 feet. So,
right. And if you think back to the dinosaurs, we covered this in the Growing Earth episode, so I won't belabor it too much. But there are dinosaurs that were far too massive to survive in current gravity. Dragonflies that they wouldn't be able to get off the ground. They're several meters long wingspan. They just couldn't fly in current gravity. But in a lower gravity, if you consider Growing Earth, if they've been through a few cycles, into the past, then maybe gravity was much less, and they actually could fly. So,
right.
Yeah.
I had some other notes that I had put were, well, first off, and I already kind of talked about this, but all the symbolism behind Sirius.
Yeah.
As we talked about with the Sphinx potentially and the pyramids. And if you think about the golden ages where we might have had much, stronger, like this could explain how we developed these massive monuments that we can't explain how they were built with such precision, with these like so heavy ton blocks that we don't know how they moved, that I don't even know if we could do it with today's engineering. The fact that they did that with such precision this would seem to explain some of these things, these massive monuments. We also are finding tons of underwater cities all over the place. I saw this thing they did, like I don't know what exactly they did, like an infrared view of some cities in Vietnam, I believe it was, or Cambodia or something. Found all these ancient underwater cities underneath the ground and water there. So this would seem to explain some of that. And also it would explain maybe why history seems to go back a lot farther than we say, a lot farther. And
I don't know if you've been watching. I don't know if you've been watching the New Earth channel, the New Earth YouTube channel. She goes, Sylvie is a speaker on there. She goes back into ancient monuments, doing a great job of just blowing that wide open. There seem to be monuments that are well over 100,000 years old. Some of the blocks are well over 100 tons. Some of the architecture is done with precision that we couldn't do today. These huge blocks are being cut with apparently saws that can leave only a 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter gap in huge blocks. We can't do that in our quarries today. We can cut these big blocks, but there's going to be a gap of, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters. So if you want to explore ancient monuments, it's a fantastic resource there.
Yeah, I had a couple other points. One of them being, well, again, this could be how we have all these archetypes in our heads from different ages of different types of consciousness, and all these different types of archetypes that have developed over time. It's like they're not coming from nowhere. They're coming from this collective reservoir of consciousness that we've built up over going through many ages. And the other one I put, well, 2 of them. It would make so much sense now why we studied the stars so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Why were they so obsessed? It wasn't just they were looking at pretty pictures. These were really, really, really important to the destiny of mankind. And think about this, okay? Think about the event where they were coming out of the descending Kali Yuga, the very lowest consciousness. Wars were common. People were, treating each other very badly. And think about the crossover into ascending Kali Yuga. That must have been one of the most or possibly the most momentous moment for the past 10,000 years. And that, I think, is the origin of Christianity. I think the Gnostic Christians were the people that knew about that crossing over. They knew what it meant, and they were persecuted mercilessly. They knew that that crossing over was the savior. It meant they were coming out of the age of the descending Kali with the low consciousness, and humanity was going to be saved by this crossing over. And I think the Roman Catholic Church came around and obfuscated and made it just a big story about some a man that came down from heaven and is going to save everybody. I think it gets deeper than that. I think as we get into an area of higher consciousness, as humanity raises its consciousness, I'm seeing this already, man, and I'm sure you're seeing it too. When you talk with people that are on this sort of quest for truth, if you can call it that we're on, we're just trying to figure everything out, and we're getting a bit closer, a bit closer, a bit closer. I'm starting to see people that are sort of behaving and acting in a similar way. It's like a collective consciousness. If everybody sees the same truth, everybody's kind of on the same page, it's kind of like they come together into an egregore, a group consciousness where they behave similarly. And I might call that the Christ consciousness. It's a higher consciousness. You still have your individual ego, and you still have to take care of your body, but more and more people are acting with compassion. They're doing the right thing. They're not being so greedy as people, more and more people come online. It's like a distributed computer almost,
It's like when you say that, it's like you're aligning yourself with natural law. I consider truth natural law.
Yeah. Or God or nature. To me, it's all the same thing. Yeah. If you were to ask me what religion I have right now, it's simply truth. I simply am trying to align myself with truth. So yeah, you see references to this in many religions, in many cultures, possibly in Islam. I confess that I'm a bit too ignorant in this area, but you see the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca, where they go in circles around this big black cube. I'm sure you've seen this. And there's a relic there, the black stone. So does that black stone represent Sirius B? And the circling around that represents our spiral orbit with it. Perhaps it does. I can't speak for the prophet, of course, but it's just a possibility. Buddhism, you have go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that I was just wrapping up that last point. Is that studying the stars is more than just keeping time and having these symbols. It is a map of human consciousness.
Yeah.
And that would explain so much why it was in all the mythologies, allegorical stories. It was a map of human consciousness, and that's why the procession was so damn important. That's why you have the Mayan calendar and different things like that. That's why you have the why we're in the age of Aquarius. They like other
the water brain.
Right. They studied these. They had these ages of conscious, like where the procession point that they looked at, there was a different constellation in that point on the procession. And so that's why you have different ages, like age of Aquarius, age of Cancer, and blah, blah, blah. And so that would make exact sense why these.
All that is, that tells you where you are. Where are you on that procession of the equinoxes? And where you are determines what level of energetic field you're in, which is going to determine your level of consciousness, which is going to determine how hot the sun is burning, how fast the earth is growing. Are you heading into a really bad time in the next 1,000 years, and you need to let your kids and your grandkids, you need to let them know what's coming. Winter is coming. Well, fortunately, it appears that we're coming out of this area, out of lower consciousness. But I think we have some growing pains to get through. In the meantime, that's going to be in what might this mean moving forward.
I had just one last point before, and then any last points, you can definitely wrap up any of the last points. The only last one I really had was so studying this for a while, you realize that, okay, some people seem to have a kind of had access to the knowledge of all this hidden information for a while. And this would seem, okay, if you take this into what we're talking about, a lot of people had access to this within the Kali Yuga. Maybe they knew we were going into this Kali Yuga, or maybe a bunch was wiped out because of the flood, or I don't know. There's plenty of reasons you could talk about. But it seems a lot of people had access to all this information while we were in the Kali Yuga. Maybe some of them, that's why in Tibet, they went to Tibet and some of this knowledge was hoarded. But it does seem that during this dark time, a lot of hidden knowledge, which we call occult knowledge and esoteric, whatever you want to call it, has been hoarded or hidden while in the Kali Yuga. And you can make different points about this. Maybe
to give them an advantage over the rest of us.
You could say give an advantage. Maybe not that I believe this, but you could also make the point, maybe they thought people were in too disharmonic of a state to have access to this knowledge. I don't necessarily prescribe to that, but you could say that's what their thinking was potentially. I'm not saying I'm more on your line of thinking. I think they're hoarding it for themselves, but
I think those are several layers of it. I think there's several layers of it. I think one of the more profound implications of this whole cycle, especially of the Kali Yuga, is you don't grow unless you go through hard times. If everything's just cool all the time, everything's good, you just chill on the couch and eat chips and watch South Park all day, and unless you have some hard times to get through, fractal that out to a species, unless the species has some hard times to get through, unless the species has an opponent, a good tough opponent. I used to play Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a lot, and I was fortunate enough to have some really good players at my gym, and I was able to make good progress because these guys, they were gold medalists at Pan Ams. I had multiple gold medalists at my gym. And so, I'd get used to fighting them and kind of trying to raise my game to try to compete with them, and they'd kick my butt all over the mat. Don't get me wrong. But then when I go to another gym, it wasn't so bad because I was used to training with just animals that were so much better than me. And I go to another gym and it wasn't so bad. And it really helped me raise my game. I'm sure you've seen that in other sports. In any game you can think of, chess is going to be that way. If you're only competing against scrubs and you really have no competition, your game's not really going to improve. So if you think about this from a species standpoint, this whole Yuga cycle is kind of like an engine for raising the consciousness of now, anyhow, the human species. And it really puts these bad guys, the controllers, it kind of puts them in a new light. Yeah, they're evil people, and I can't condone anything that they're doing. But if you really back up and look at it from the outside, if it weren't for these people pressing us and murdering us and starving us, we would have no reason to have to raise our own consciousness and grow as a species. And similar, if there is a cataclysm, depending on how bad it is, not everybody's going to make it. It's going to be the more aware people, the people that kind of know what's going on, are going to be the ones that make it through. So kind of, it's a kind of a nasty analogy, but it's kind of like if you have a a petri dish full of bacteria, and you hit them with sort of an antibiotic that doesn't kill all of them. The ones that survive are going to be stronger, then they're going to reproduce. You hit them with an antibiotic again, eventually you're going to have a really strong petri dish full of antibiotics. And if you call the earth the petri dish and we're the bacteria, you can kind of see that as happening. It's
right.
Just
that's a good point.
That's one of the biggest mind screwers of this whole thing is I can kind of see the purpose of the big bad guys. I can kind of see what they're for, and you know, sympathy for the devil. I don't know, but it's boy, that one really threw me for a loop. Just a total paradigm change. But we still have to fight them. We still have to.
I look at it multiple ways. I personally, I agree in line with your thinking. Maybe they're there maybe they're there and they don't even realize they're not. Maybe they don't even consciously know they're playing that part. Maybe they do.
I think you're right for the most part. I think there's just greedy people, bad people, evil people. Sociopaths.
I think also if they knew we were about to raise consciousness and they knew they could hold power through the Kali Yuga because we weren't going to be as conscious, and they had access to this knowledge, so they were able to keep power throughout the Kali Yuga, then I think now they're trying to keep the lid on it, and it's going to be a losing battle ultimately. I think so too. It's not going to be without a fight, but it's going to be a losing battle in my opinion. I mean, I already have, even before I even discovered any of this, I was like, there's no way that it can keep, there's no way it can keep the lid on the internet. I just don't think they could keep the lid on at this point. All this stuff's coming out of the bag. It's just, truth is just flooding from the seams. Even though they're trying to muddle the waters with disinformation, I believe that the cream rises to the top eventually, and it's going to be hard and harder to. I mean, more and more people are awakening, and we're just in I think it's still in the beginning stages of this awakening process. So it's going to be hard to keep the lid on. But anyways, any last points? I know you were about to go into a Buddhism point before. Any last points on ancient things that you talked about before we move into the kind of the last?
I just have a few stragglers. Buddhism, I think, kind of ties into this, and again, I'm not as educated on that, and boy, I need to. After kind of putting together this model, I don't know about you, but I feel like I really need to study all different ancient cultures and religions all over the world, because just my basic knowledge of them, I can already see how things tie in. So I feel like I need to go read the Bible again. I need to read the Tao. I need to read. I need to go back and read Greek mythology, man. The Odyssey. It features Odysseus slaying the Kraken. You know, the Kraken could represent the banking, media, military, business cartel with its.
Or it could represent like the dark, kind of the dark stages of the Kali Yuga.
Well, I think it represents the journey of humanity. But again, I got to go back through it again, because when we learned this in school, we sure weren't talking about the Yuga cycles. We were just saying, here's a story, and it's ancient mythology, and it's just a story for you to learn, and it doesn't really mean anything. They were just worshiping their gods. They're just being silly people worshiping their gods, their sky gods. And, now, put in this new context, you can see there's a reason they were telling these stories. They were trying to pass this knowledge on to the great youngins, grandkids. Just before we move on, I want to point out Göbekli Tepe seems to be essentially a tracking station for Sirius. Now, it's funny, if you go on the internet and you search for Göbekli Tepe, Sirius, like the first hits you get are, Göbekli Tepe definitely had nothing to do with Sirius. No, sir, not a chance. I mean, come on. They're practically shouting it out just by denying it. It's like a little kid that runs into the room real quick and says, I didn't eat any cookies. I mean, you know what's going on. And throughout this whole thing, the obfuscation, the information fuzzing is just rampant through this whole thing. With the Yuga cycles, it's hard to find a straight answer on how many years exactly are they. And if this is a thousands of year old religion and culture, I would think they'd have this nailed down. But you find numbers varying from it's 24,000 years up to it's 432,000 years. The whole cycle takes millions and millions of years, and I'm sorry, I just can't buy that. One last thing, there's also a monument to Orion and Sirius I did not know this, in Argentina in New Mexico, complete with Orion and Canis Major. So they were building monuments trying to show us Sirius. Nobody needs to show us the sun. We can look up and we see, yeah, the sun, that's super important. It goes, we go around it. We can figure that out. I don't know if I ever would have figured it out unless I really took a liking to tracking the stars, that the sun had a binary star, that it was spiraling around, and that, just leads to all the rest of this this revelation, if you call it that, or this hypothesis. It's still a hypothesis. We're working on it, but man, it's a fun hypothesis. So
there's a lot of references in the Bible to it, like the three kings, and the brightest star in the sky,
the three wise men. Well, so here's a last point on that. Let's see, it was Michael Sarian talks about this. So the three wise men. Let's see, I had some of this written down. The three wise men, they found the Christ, the cross, via the bright star in the sky, and yeah, I mean that's the three stars of Orion's belt, and that's Sirius right now, right there. That's the savior of mankind. So Michael Saria says, we've all heard of Jesus of Nazareth, of course. Jesus from Nazareth. The only trouble is there's no such place as Nazareth. There never has been a place called Nazareth, and no map of any age ever shows us a location or the place of Nazareth. The word, in fact, derives from the Egyptian word Nazir, meaning prince who is sent, and also from Nasir, meaning Sirius, the star Sirius. So it is really Jesus of Nasirius. Furthermore, the word carpenter, and Jesus was a carpenter, remember? Well, the word carpenter comes from the Semitic nagar, which means serpent priests. I don't know about the last part, but that's more Michael Sarian. So he probably has some good info to add there. I actually haven't gotten that deep into his work, but I bet you he's got something to say. But I will say, you always gotta keep an eye for misinformation all along this path, all the way along. You'll have somebody that'll tell you 90% truth, and then they'll either not tell you something, lies by omission, or they'll spin something. Like for example, the Temple, Robert and Olivia Temple, with their book that makes a really good case for the Sphinx originally being a big Anubis statue. But somehow they just don't make the connection between Anubis and the dog star Sirius. They just they just leave it there. It was a big dog statue, and there you go. That's what it was. Very strange. One last point on the Sphinx. Is it possible that the deluge was responsible for a lot of that water erosion? I don't know. Possibility. So